Welcome to the deep dive. We always love getting your source suggestions. You know, we love to dig in and really unpack some fascinating ideas. And, our listeners are all about learning new things without getting bogged down.
That's right. And today's material, it's definitely one of the more unique deep dives we've done. We're going to be exploring a transcript, actually, from a YouTube video. It's a hypnotic regression session. And the title of the video, it's a mouthful. It's 914 ES Ernesto, Ligada de Seres a la Tierra, Origin Ser Humano, Hipnosis Regresiva, Caballero Grifasi. And the channel it's on is Caballero Grifasi.
Yeah, that title is a bit of a doozy. But hey, listeners can always check the show notes for a link.
Exactly.
So our main subject here, it's Ernesto. He's the one undergoing this hypnotic regression. And right off the bat, you can tell from the transcript that he's been dealing with some pretty tough stuff in his life. The kind of challenges that feel like they just won't let go. Money problems, relationships, family issues. He's really looking for some answers, some way to break free.
Yeah, it's like he feels stuck. And he even mentions some past experiences he's had with curanderos. These are traditional healers. And it seems like he thinks these encounters might actually be connected to some of the difficulties he's been facing. Things like persistent fear, problems in his relationships, his career hitting a dead end. He even talks about recurring thoughts of suicide. It's a pretty intense backdrop for why he's turning to this specific approach. So our goal today, it's not about judging whether what Ernesto describes is true or false. We're not here to do that. What we're going to do is dive into the story that unfolds during this hypnosis. What he says about Earth's history, his beliefs about the origins of humanity and these entities he encounters. It's wild stuff, but we're approaching it all with a neutral perspective, right? Just laying out what's in the source material. So the transcript starts with the hypnotist, setting the stage, making sure Ernesto is comfortable explaining what they're hoping to achieve. And Ernesto himself, he voices these struggles, his hopes for finding some kind of solution. He also touches on that feeling that his past might be playing a role in all of this. You can really sense his hope for a breakthrough, for some relief.
Then comes the typical countdown you often hear in hypnosis. 10, 9, 8, down to 1. And that's where things take, well, a pretty unexpected turn, right into some extraordinary territory.
Yeah, it gets interesting quickly. Ernesto, he starts describing this pulling sensation in his chest. And then he actually feels something leaving his body. So we're no longer just talking about personal struggles.
Yeah.
We're moving into the realm of, well, the unexplained.
And this something that he feels leaving, it starts to take on a form.
Right.
At first, it's like a dark shadow, but then it becomes more solid, a black shape.
Yeah.
And this entity, it actually communicates, gives a name for itself.
Exactly. The first name it offers is oscuridad, which is Spanish for darkness. But then, as the hypnotist asks more questions, it provides another name, pequeño, meaning little or small in Spanish.
And when asked about its origins, pequeño doesn't exactly claim to be from around here.
Right. Pequeño says it comes from the black point of the universe, and when the hypnotist probes further, it even specifies a location.
Orion. So right away, we're dealing with extraterrestrial origins. That's a pretty big jump from personal issues to cosmic beings.
It is. And it's interesting how specific they get. While the black point of the universe is this kind of abstract notion, Orion is a real constellation.
Yeah.
And it often pops up in these discussions about, well, alien encounters.
And then Pequeño mentions a commander figure, a being named Asmar. When Asmar supposedly appears to Ernesto, the description is, well, pretty vivid. It's a green reptilian being with a long tail, yellow chest, and these striking yellow and red eyes. But the hypnotist jumps in with an interesting comment at this point.
Yeah, the hypnotist just states flat out that reptiles don't have any real power. It makes you wonder if that's a personal belief of the hypnotist or maybe an attempt to sort of steer the direction of the regression.
Who knows? But it's curious, for sure. But despite that, Asmar claims to be from a place called Astar, spelled H-R-A-A-S-T-A-R.
That's another specific detail.
It is, and not stopping there, the hypnotist then encourages Ernesto to reach out to Asmar's superior, a being called Star. Now, the description of Star is, well, quite different from Asmar.
Yeah, totally different vibe. At first, Star appears as this egg-shaped energy form. But then when Ernesto reaches out with what he calls his energetic hands and makes contact, it transforms into a more humanoid figure with small horns, 2 ears, red eyes, and a reddish cape. It's almost like the interaction triggers a change in appearance.
Right, and, where there's a leader, there's often an entourage. 3 more beings appear alongside Star, 2 more reptilian types, and a larger being with incredibly strong, long hands. This being identifies itself as Legion.
Talk about a name with some baggage. I mean, legion implies a whole multitude, right? A collective force.
For sure. And Legion actually explains their purpose on Earth, which is a pretty significant claim. They state their purpose is aliment food and that they feed on energy they get from humans.
Why humans, though?
Well, according to Legion, human energy is more subtle than their own. So we've got this core idea emerging, humans as an energy source for these beings.
But it's a strange contradiction, isn't it? Because Legion insists they're self-created, more advanced than humans, yet they're snarving dependent on this human energy. It doesn't quite add up.
Totally. So where are they operating from? Well, when the hypnotist focuses back on Pequeño, now referred to as Pequeño 2 in the transcript, it's revealed that their base is located abajo de la tierra, below the earth.
And not just anywhere underground.
No. Pequeño 2 specifies that it's located beneath the water in the region of Iraq-Iran. A pretty specific location, wouldn't you say? So picture this subterranean base, a network of rooms, corridors with beings moving about. Sounds like an entire underground civilization, right?
Right. And they even provide a time frame for its construction, about 30,000, 40 years ago. That puts it way back in Earth's history.
Imagine that. And get this, the construction process involved machines that emitted light to create tunnels, brought to Earth by these elongated, cigar-shaped ships. Plus, these beings apparently can't survive in our atmosphere.
So they used bubbles or crystal spheres to work in that hot underground environment. They describe it as about 60 degrees Celsius with rivers flowing through it. It's like a whole other world down there.
And the structures themselves, well, they're described as self-constructing, formed through thought.
Like mental telekinesis making buildings.
Right. And the being in charge of this whole operation is described as a bird-like being with feathers named Chavez. But why go through all this trouble to build this elaborate base?
Well, the reason they give is to hide as part of an exploration. Apparently, other beings in the universe do the same. It hints at this larger cosmic context, maybe even some kind of conflict, a war against machine-like entities. Things are getting complex.
Definitely. So where do humans fit into all of this? Well, the regression then shifts to focus on, well, our origins, and it's presented as a selection process.
Buckle up, folks. Here comes the human origin story according to this hypnotic regression.
According to this narrative, the first human on Earth is found in the water, humanoid in form but with fins and gills. And this being is described as being part of the Earth with fish-like parents. Definitely not your typical evolutionary tale.
And then, beings resembling modern humans, they supposedly appear later as a result of collection and experimentation by reptilian beings, overseen by a red bird-faced entity called Rojo. It's a pretty direct claim of extraterrestrial intervention in our development.
And this initial selection process involved a whole menagerie of beings, eventually narrowed down to 5 primate races. There were water beings, mermaid-like, giants meant for hard labor, snake-like beings, tiny virus or bacteria-like beings, and gorilla-like primates. It's quite the lineup.
And the winners are?
Yeah, mermaid-like beings. They're deemed the most intelligent, and they're chosen to be modified, turned into, well, slaves, essentially, used for both work and energy.
How did they modify them?
Well, they describe it as taking genetic material, DNA, which they refer to as energy in the universe, from the other selected beings, and using it to enhance these mermaid-like beings, giving them strength, muscles, cunning, basically a targeted genetic engineering.
Wow.
And they even tried to create something like the current human form right from the start, but it failed. The beings they created were too aggressive, not what they wanted, so they ended up destroying them with energy-based machines.
Trial and error, it seems.
Right. But the story continues. The mermaid-like beings, they knew what was going on. They were aware of the entity's plans, so they were subjected to further modifications. Their brains were altered using a machine, and they underwent genetic engineering to ensure their obedience to the entities.
Talk about control, and there's this constant back and forth of genetic information happening between the entities and these modified beings. It's like they're constantly tweaking things.
And eventually they hit the jackpot, the current human form as we know it. It's described as the result of mixing the DNA of various Earth animals with the genetic material of these entities.
So we're like hybrids, in a sense, according to this narrative.
Right. And here's the kicker. We humans were supposedly producing free energy for these entities all the time through this psychic connection.
Like a constant energy drain. But why not just take human bodies? If they're so advanced, wouldn't that be easier?
Well, they claim they have no desire for our bodies. They consider their own forms almost perfect. They need human energy specifically because it's, well, more subtle, like the energy found in plants.
Okay, so subtle energy is the key.
Right. And this subtle energy, it supposedly prolongs their lifespan, extends it to around 2,000 years, but then they have to transfer to another body, a kind of reincarnation for them.
Fascinating. So we've got their origins, their motivation, their alleged lifespan. But what happens to us after we die?
Well, this is where the narrative gets really intriguing and a bit unsettling, I have to say. It introduces this concept of an awula, or cage system.
A cage.
Yeah. It's described as a trap, basically, designed to keep human consciousness within this energy harvesting cycle, even after death. Mental programs, holographic illusions, the whole works.
Oh.
Yeah. So when we die, according to this narrative, we're bombarded with messages that basically tell us these entities are God, and this leads us to willingly stay within the system.
It's like a cosmic shell game.
Right. And the belief in these entities as divine beings, it's supposedly implanted through a pre-planned process guiding human consciousness.
So where does religion fit into all of this?
Religion in this framework is portrayed as a tool for control, a divide and conquer strategy to keep us from realizing our true nature and recognizing the presence of these entities. They even claim that the first religion didn't have a specific name for God. The belief itself was the implant.
It's a pretty bold statement, to put it mildly. But it definitely makes you think about the power of belief systems.
Absolutely. And because of all this manipulation orchestrated through religion, humans willingly give their energy to this perceived God.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And at this point, the hypnotist starts to push back a bit.
Right. The hypnotist challenges Legion, asking why they're revealing all of this.
And they suggest that maybe Legion is being compelled to answer by Ernesto's own will, because he's in this hypnotic state. It's like there's a power struggle happening within the session itself.
Right. And the hypnotist gives Legion a choice. Stop interfering with Ernesto and avoid having to answer, or continue and be subject to the hypnotist's commands, which are presented as representing Ernesto's will. It's a showdown.
So what happens?
Well, Legion backs down. They disconnect from Ernesto, and he describes this feeling of separation, of tension, and negative energy lifting. He doesn't feel connected to these entities anymore, a real sense of liberation.
That's going to be a powerful feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And then the hypnotist guides Ernesto to identify and remove these energetic implants that were supposedly used for the connection.
Where were they?
In his head, his back, and his hands. But here's the thing. Even after that, a small, dark entity is still hanging around. So Ernesto is guided to open a dimensional portal for it to leave, and it gets absorbed by a light.
Okay, but that's not the end of it, is it?
Nope. A large egg-like light reappears, and the hypnotist identifies this as a potential new form of manipulation. Ernesto is told to revoke permission for this light to enter his space.
It's like a constant battle for control.
Right. And the hypnotist explains that any agreements we make within our physical bodies, they create this filter for our awareness. So Ernesto is guided to cut any control agreements he might have unknowingly made. It's all about personal sovereignty, taking back control.
That's a really interesting concept.
It is. And finally, Ernesto is brought back to his normal state through a countdown. And he reports feeling lighter, more secure, stronger, at peace. A definite positive shift.
That's great.
It is. He remembers that Sada entity, probably Asmar or Star, mispronounced, and the feeling of pressure, the realization of being accompanied by these entities. He also recalls the commander of a fleet of beings, the interconnectedness between them.
So he remembers it all.
Yeah, but the important thing is he reiterates that feeling of separation, of no longer identifying with those entities. He feels like himself again, and he even agrees to the video being published, hoping that his experience might help others who are struggling with similar things.
That's pretty selfless. So to sum it all up, this hypnotic regression session has given us a really detailed and, let's be honest, pretty wild narrative. We've got these claims of ancient subterranean bases, a long-standing extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and a story of human origins that involves genetic manipulation.
Not to mention this idea of humans as a constant source of energy and all these control mechanisms like religious beliefs and implanted programs that stick with us even after death.
Right. And just to reiterate, our goal today wasn't to say whether any of this is true or false, We've simply laid out what's in this one transcript.
What's really fascinating, though, is how detailed and internally consistent the story is. It's a very specific perspective on Earth's history and reality itself.
And that's what we want our listeners to think about. How much power do belief systems have in shaping our reality? What about that innate human desire to understand where we come from, our place in the universe? How do stories like this that challenge conventional thinking resonate with you, or maybe clash with your own worldview?
What new questions have we sparked in your mind? That's the deep dive for today, folks. Keep those suggestions coming. And until next time, happy exploring.